Well, the video that you're about to watch contains diabolical activities. Viewer discretion is advised.
Is advised. Amen.
No, but on a real note, this episode here, I think it was it made the devil mad. We're
Yeah.
talking about the devil, demons, and deliverance, and I cannot tell you how much trouble we had on this episode. You're about to see the glitches. You're about to see the missing words, the missing phrases. Which further proves our point because we have been recording this podcast for 3 seasons and have not encountered anything like this before. So we do our best to put out quality, and so we just wanted to definitely start this video out with this disclaimer, but we kept it intact the way it was recorded because we wanted to see for y'all to see exactly what happened so you can see for yourselves, because literally we recorded the episode live and none of the stuff that's going on in this video went on while we were recording it.
None of it.
And usually whenever we have a guest on and there are glitches and stuff like that, I'll hear them. I'll know, okay, when it comes to the editing process, I'm going to have to edit that. Nothing. It was smooth sailing. But as soon as I opened the video, I opened the audio, I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. So we wanted to do a disclaimer to let guys know. But at the end of this video, stay tuned because we're going to fill in the gaps of what is missing from the initial video. So here goes. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Truth Reveal podcast, where we host conversations that relate as we reconcile to reveal God's truth. I am your host today, Holly Harris, and I'm joined by my co-hosts,
Latricia Peak, aka Sweet.
And April Rivers.
Yeah. So today we interrupt the regularly scheduled program already in progress to bring an episode that is in line with the season that we are in. Last week, of course, we started our mental health episode, and we're going to continue that on November the 6th. So the second part of that will air then. But what we wanted to do is do an episode kind of in line with Halloween. So and basically talk about the spiritual aspects of that, when it comes to demons, when it comes to the devil, that whole topic of discussion. We want to kind of bring awareness and bring information out around it. So what I'm going to do is start off by just giving a brief history of Halloween if you don't already know what the origin of Halloween is. I got this off of the CBN website to say, folk. But anyway, on their website, they had that the origins of Halloween are Celtic in tradition and have to do with observing the end of summer sacrifices to gods in Druidic tradition. In what is now Britain and France, it was the beginning of the Celtic year, and they believe that Sawan, I think that's how you pronounce it, the Lord of Death, sent evil spirits abroad to attack humans who could escape only by assuming disguises and looking like evil spirits themselves. The waning of the sun and the approach of dark winter made the evil spirits rejoice and play nasty tricks. So trick or treat. Believe it or not, most of our Halloween practices can be traced back to these old pagan rites and superstitions. Wicca, which is the official religion of witchcraft, they feel that Halloween is a real sacred day for those who follow that false religion. In fact, it is one of two high holy days for them. They do have the Celtic belief of the spirits being released, is a current belief for them. When they were released to do evil or whatever, along with the worship of Sawan, the Lord of Death. Both are promoted as something that they embrace on that day. So we wanted to kind of dive in to that whole thing, because many what I have found, and I did some research, is that more and more believers, and even those who didn't believe or whatever, maybe they believed before, don't actually believe that the devil, demons exist. So just to
Mm.
kind of read off some statistics on that, I was looking on the Gallup poll website, and they did a poll back in 2016, and they did a random sample of about 1,025 adults. They were aged 18 and older. They were all living in the U.S. And the District of Columbia. And so for each of the following items that they read to them, this is how many, the percentage of them that, answered this certain way. So they asked them if they believed in God, and 79% said yes, 10% were not sure about it, and 11% said that they didn't believe. Okay, when they were asked about angels, 72% believe in them, 12% are not sure about it, and then 16% don't believe in it. Okay, and then they go into heaven and hell. 71% believe in heaven, 64% believe in hell, which is,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And then, of course, 14% were not sure about heaven, 13% weren't sure about hell, 15% didn't believe in heaven, and 22% didn't believe in hell. And so, but when it came to the discussion of the devil, 61% believe, 12% are not sure, and 27% didn't believe in the devil. So what we wanted to do was kind of, talk about that whole thing as it relates to the devil and demons and the church. And I wanted to ask the ladies like this first question, like, why do you guys feel that more and more Christians, or just more and more people in general, don't believe in the devil?
Hit
Who
it,
wants to
sweet.
go first? Who wants to go
You go
first?
first. I want to know you.
Okay, so um, I feel like that a lot of people don't believe in the devil, um, because I think we don't want to believe in something bad. When I was in
Mm,
college, my degree is in religious studies, and I remember taking like a new modern religion class, and I wrote a paper about the presence of angels and
mm,
how they were doing these worldwide studies and statistics about angels, and people were giving accounts of what they felt like having experienced angels and
yeah.
encounters with angels and dead relatives coming back as angels and so on and so forth. And
Mhm,
so my whole purpose, I forget what book it was based upon, because it was a book that I was kind of writing the paper about. And I remember distinctly the point that I was making in my paper was that if you believe in angels so strongly, then you have to believe in their counterpart, which are
mm,
demons. And so
yeah.
I think there's just been a lot of sensationalization, um, sensationalizing, you know what
Uh,
I'm trying to say,
yeah.
help me out, around the good. I think that there is
Mm,
a lack of teaching in our churches when we don't talk about those things that are spooky, or as some people would say, super deep. I
mhm,
don't think a lot of teachers teaching is taking place about deliverance, because if you're going to teach
yeah.
on deliverance, then you have to teach about the presence of the demonic and the
Mhm,
adversary. And I think just over the course of time, it's not something that's before us, and our belief in it just kind of dwindles. And then just the base
mm,
of, if you've not experienced something, then it's also hard for you to believe in it as well.
that's so true.
That's good.
So true. April?
Well, for me, I believe it's part of what I agree with, sweet Latricia, that people just don't want to think of evil things, bad things, which is funny to me because, like she said, there sometimes is an overemphasis on angels and infatuation
Yeah.
on the what you would call the light side of spiritual realm. You know,
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-mm.
lightness.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing I can say, I think people's unwillingness to, I'll put it this way. You know how people used to say the devil made me do it? And we
Mm-hmm.
have a generation that says, uh, well, you know, the devil didn't make me do anything. I do what I want. It's kind of like a
Mm.
negative thing where you say, well,
Yeah.
nothing's influencing me. It's not, you know, there's no
Mm-hmm.
such thing as evil or good. It's what I want to do. It's kind of a weird type of self-worship where sometimes believing in the
Yeah.
enemy would have to mean, because of the way the biblical definition of what the enemy does is to steal, kill, and
Okay, and
destroy.
destroy.
And he
Mm-hmm.
also is also known as a deceiver,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
as a father of lies. So that means that to believe in him means that there is something evil that has the possibility of influencing mankind.
Mm, that's good.
Then you've got to take that knowledge and say, okay, well, if that is real, and if that is true,
Mm.
then I have the propensity
Ability
or
of
ability, yes, to be
Yeah.
influenced by evil.
influence. Right.
And then I got to
Mm.
do be responsible for that. What do I got to answer? Well, then that's again comes into my need for God, my need for knowing who he is. And people
Yeah.
don't want to need
They don't want
God.
to
They don't
open that
want to need anything.
Pandora's box.
So it is very convenient, I think, for
Yeah.
some to just pretend the devil doesn't exist.
That is real good,
That
April.
is
That is
good.
really good. That's yeah,
Wow.
I
That's
love the way
good.
you brought that out because to
Mm-hmm.
acknowledge evil, in turn, you automatically have to acknowledge God.
Mm-hmm.
Because who's gonna help
Yes.
you overcome the evil?
Yeah.
And it's the hope that comes from Jesus. So
Wow.
yeah, that's good.
That is so true. And I think too that was a good point as far as I think there has been trying to stop who give the devil too much credit. In
Mm-hmm.
True.
other words. And
True.
then there are those that, so I think that in essence, in trying to instead of bringing balance, there has been, a stomping out completely and totally of his existence, as a
Mm-hmm.
result of that. So I think that was a good point as it relates to that whole I'm in control of everything that I do. And like you said,
Yeah.
whenever you acknowledge that the enemy is real, then you got to acknowledge that God is real. And then if
Yeah.
Yeah.
if you acknowledge God is real, then there becomes an accountability as it
Yeah.
relates to my actions, and you know what I'm saying, and that there is a place that I'm going and that I'm going to have to give an account for everything that I do. So
Right.
Mm-hmm.
instead
Mm-hmm.
of doing that, it's like, it doesn't exist. So, and then
Right.
I
Mm-hmm.
think too, the lack of exposure, like you were saying, like, and we're gonna get into this, like the fact that sometimes when you go to other countries, you see those things overtly. I think here in the US, a lot of times demonic activity is kind of under the surface, but if you go somewhere like Africa or honey, they practicing witchcraft out in the open. They,
Right. Right.
it's overt, but it's like here it's kind of more of a subtle thing. So what do you
Mm-hmm.
guys think about that as far as like, because like in our churches, because we're going to go into this a little later. There was a young lady by the name of Jenny Weaver, and she's a worship leader. And recently we came across her video, and she began to talk about her experiences getting into witchcraft. And it started when she looked at the movie The Craft,
Mm-hmm.
and she was looking for something to give her direction, to give her answers. And so as a result, she began doing a lot of the practices that were in the movie, and it led to a downward spiral. Well, later on in her life, drug addiction, just so much happened to her. I encourage you to go watch it. We'll have it in our show notes for you to actually watch it yourself. But I think the video is actually going viral. But A very good
Good.
video how she tells her testimony, and she talks about this, about how, in the process of her deliverance from demons, like she was a Christian, she had actually become saved. And this is another misconception, thinking that after you become saved everything is gravy, and that there is no process of deliverance after that point. But she went through a whole process of deliverance where she literally had an out of body experience, and saw herself being, saw demons being cast out of her as the minister was, calling them out. It's almost like she stepped outside of her body and could see her responses to all of the questions that the minister was asking. So it was very interesting. But stuff like that happens in other countries all of the time. What do y'all think about that? Like, as far as the lack of exposure that people may have to that, when they go into churches, they may not see that happening. So it's kind of like, is it real? Is you ain't? What do you
I
got?
think I'll jump in first with that one. I think, Holly, I think that it's not so much as a lack of exposure, but I think you're dead on when you talk about the subtlety of America, the subtlety
Yeah.
of the United States. We can all account of being in churches and being in environments where we've been able to identify something is just not right.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
thing is, the something doesn't get addressed. We just pass over it.
Mm,
We pass over behaviors. We pass over how people act, how they carry themselves, because sometimes it is overt, like you're saying. It
yeah.
is the growling, the foaming, those type of
Yeah.
physical manifestations. And
Hmm.
sometimes it's the cunning, deceptive divisiveness that takes place within a body that can speak to oppression and depression and possession just as much as the other person being overt about it. So
Yeah.
I think in our nation, it's probably in certain sets, it's not that it's not taking place. It may just not look the same.
Yeah, got you. Yeah. Yeah. It's more subtle. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm gonna go somewhere a little left with this one.
Oh, okay.
I
Go
may be
ahead.
right.
Go
Go
I
left. Well,
may
now.
that's
be
go
wrong.
left.
I don't know, but I think it may have something to do with America's look. We have a lot of European influence because, the
Hmm.
settlers here, colonizers, whatever you want to call them, coming from Europe. And then even us as descendants of African people, we were taught their culture, to operate in America. And I think about the history of that. And one, their European thought of being prim, proper, holding a certain posture.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? A certain look, a certain
Mm-hmm.
what is proper and what is improper. Even if you're full of the devil, you know what I'm saying?
Oh
If
my.
you posture yourself a certain way, you
The
look a
That's
certain
good.
way.
appearance. Come on.
Appearance is really big around here. And
Yes.
then also you go back to the Salem witch trials, and even this is stuff that happened in Europe where people were
Yeah.
Hmm.
being accused of being witches and burned at the stake. And because of that type of uh, persecution of witches here in America, because of the European influence and because it was a Catholic, Protestant, thing,
Hmm.
they would have to be more underground. They would have to
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
survive. You know what I'm saying? In this culture, to be more underground. So I think
Yeah.
that may have a little something to do with it.
That's good too.
That is
And,
good.
and, it, and if I'm a demon,
Whew.
and I know, and if I know that all I have to do is sit quiet, wear the right outfit
Ooh, and ain't
Uh-huh.
nobody
to
gonna
to
see me.
to to stay to
Oh,
stay where I'm at and wreak
To
all the
stay at
havoc I
home.
want,
Right.
then I'm
yeah.
gonna sit still,
Yeah.
and until someone like that, like the young lady's testimony, like the woman of God that was like, I know what I see. And she was like, who are you
Yeah,
praying
she
for? You want to
did.
pray with me? Sure.
Right.
Don't know what for. You know,
Yeah.
yeah. So I kind of think that may be some of the reason why We don't see that like that in this country. And then
Mm.
I want to say this too, and we may go there, but I
Mhm.
think too, it's stuff that we do see that's obvious, but
Yeah, yeah.
we call it something
Something
else.
Something
else.
different.
Ooh,
We call it.
So
so true.
we'll call it something else, and instead of demon
Yeah.
possession, we know how people who are high on drugs, and the young lady dealt with that,
Yeah.
how they behave. We know that wanting to sleep with your own child, wanting to murder your family, then murder yourself. We know that's
Yeah.
spiritual, that's
It
wickedness,
Right,
but
is.
we
right,
don't call it that
We
here.
don't.
right,
We just
Mental
right.
say
illness.
mental
Everything.
illness,
Yeah.
or I don't know, they're trying to make up stuff
Which
like an abuse,
exists too, but go
and
ahead.
it is too, but like they're
Yeah.
trying to make up stuff for pedophiles now. We talked about this, the laws in this
Yeah.
country, this sick crap, that
Mm.
I believe God's gonna stomp down in Jesus' name, and
Yeah.
use folk. But anyway, that kind of stuff where they're trying to create a whole their own name and group of a special group of people that are minor
Yeah.
attracted. No, that is demons. That is demonic and
Wow.
nasty. And so in America here,
That's
what
so
we
true.
see it. That's
Yeah.
a manifestation. That's not normal. That's
That's
not
right.
Mhm.
natural. It is
It's
not
That's
natural for a
right.
not.
child to be wanting to cut themselves. It's not normal for a
Mm.
5 and 8
Come
year old
on.
to be saying he see thoughts of murdering his little sibling.
Or
I
wanting to murder himself.
or murder
Yeah, because
himself.
there's
I
an account. Yeah. Go ahead. I'm
Yeah, no, I'm
sorry.
sorry. I'm gonna say this, and I'm gonna let you. I want to belabor this
Yeah.
too long so y'all can get in. But I watched a document a long time ago. It was a 2020 special or something that
Hmm.
the boy's father was watching. My ex-husband was watching, and first I was like, "Oh, why are he watching this?" But it was a young girl who basically the family had been torn apart. The mama hadn't been sleeping. They had a small baby. The mama and the daddy had to separate, live in two separate houses because they were afraid the daughter was going to harm the infant because she would talk
Mm.
about murder, and she didn't sleep when she was a baby. They couldn't get her to
Wow.
sleep. And then come to find out while she was pregnant with a child, they went to some Himalayan mountains and
Oh,
got prayed
wow.
for
I
at this
remember
mountain with
this.
this not a witch doctor. They wouldn't call it a witch doctor. This Eastern
Shaman.
healer, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that opened them up with the spirits when she was pregnant with that child. That child was fully possessed.
Oh
That
my
demon was tearing up that
God.
family. But 2020 was like doing a story on it, like, hey, look at this. Isn't
Yeah, because they didn't really know what it was. And that's so
Or
it
they
just
didn't want to call it what it was.
they didn't want to call it what it
yeah.
was? Because I'm telling
Yeah.
you, go ahead.
Wow. But yeah, but that's so good because it's so true. Like as far as that whole when we talk about the subtlety and when we talk about, how, demons do enter, and a lot of times they can enter in the womb, in the childhood when you're most
Mm-hmm.
susceptible, to those things. The spirit of rejection can be transferred in the
Yeah.
womb. I believe there have been scientific studies to where, that has been proven or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, to where if you say, okay, I don't want this child, that literally the child can feel those things within the womb. And once they're born, begin to act out those expressions, and so it is so important. So, like you said, that's crazy. But instead
Mm-hmm.
of 2020, they didn't know what it was. So instead of being able to see, like, oh, look at this. This is interesting. Watch it.
This is a
Oh
good
yeah.
story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow.
Mm,
Wow. That's
mm,
crazy.
mm,
So, what I wanted to get into now was the whole thing as it related to, I kind of wanted to shift gears when it came to TVs and movies. And I was watching it was a live that I believe Psalmist Rain was doing, and she said something that kind of really caught my attention for this episode. She was talking about how people in their minds have inadvertently placed the power of witchcraft or the devils or demons over the power of God. And I began
mm.
to think about that. And I was like, you know what? That may be some truth to that. Because when I look at, when we talk about exposure, A lot of people are exposed to things through the media. And when I
Mm-hmm.
think about movies and when I think about TV and I think about how God is represented, it really, begin to swirl in my mind. I know I was thinking
Mm-hmm.
about that show Sweet that we just recently had watched, called Evil, because it was on
Evil. Oh
Netflix.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in it, the people who supposedly had God, you know
Yeah.
what I'm
Yeah.
saying, barely had any power. It just seems like whenever you watch movies where somebody is demon possessed, the demon got more power than the people who casting it out. Am
The
I
demon
wrong?
be kicking tail. Demon be kicking tail up and down the house.
I'm telling you. And then there's another show on Hulu. It's called Hellstrom. I watched that show. In that show, the demons were more powerful than the people who were supposed to know God. So it's almost like, if you don't have any exposure, if you're not a believer, if you don't go to church, and you don't have any exposure to God and to getting to know Him, all you got to go off of is what you see
What you
that's being
see.
presented to you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I kind of started thinking about that, of how people could really kind of form that idea in their minds that, oh, this witchcraft and this magic is more mystical and it's more powerful
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
than the power of God. And we all know that He is the greatest power. But what do you
Mm-hmm.
guys, think about that? Have you sensed that when it comes to some of the shows that you watch and the things you come across?
Hmm.
Go ahead, April.
No, I was just gonna say, yeah. I mean, from The Exorcist, which is really before our time when we were little girls,
Yeah.
My Lord.
but from The Exorcist on down, I think I remember saying, "The power of Christ compels you," and man, that demon was whooping,
Oh,
whooping tail. That polar,
Whooping
that
tail.
polar priest. But yeah, it's not even really a mystery to me.
Mm,
Hollywood is made of non-believers.
yeah,
That is
yeah,
not our. Now I'm not saying all are. Now let me get that straight. No, don't
mhm,
any producers watching
yeah,
or any writers watching? Hey, that are lovers of Jesus. But
mhm,
historically, Hollywood is not a place for Christians. It's not the Christian territory. Or has not
yeah,
been
it's not.
that have the big studio movies and budgets. And a lot of people, just like we all know, on college campuses, people
Mhm,
that were teaching religious studies classes were the most heathenist,
honey,
atheist. I thought I was
they
going
don't
to my New
believe it all.
Testament class to learn a little something about the Lord and get an
Not.
elective.
Not.
This man spent
Not
the
at all.
whole my tuition money paid him to
Woo.
try to make fun of Christ, Christians, be cynical. Like, it is made up of people that want to make a mockery. It's made up of some
Mm-hmm.
people who
Yeah.
have given their life knowingly to the enemy. Because that's
Mm,
one element that we don't talk about, that there are people who are absolutely aware of the devil and have allegiance to him more than instead of God.
mhm,
And I'm not saying that's what the writers of Exorcist had, but I have noticed that, but I know it's intentional, and I know
yeah.
that the devil is a prince of this air, even though God
Mhm,
Mm-hmm.
rules all. And yeah, I just think it's who has influence and
yeah.
ability, who's writing the story. You
Yeah.
know, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. I think I don't know if I had this conversation with you, Holly, but I know it's it was more than a couple of years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I don't. Holly and I are buffs, and so
Oh
we
yes.
we are we are movie buffs. So we are on
Yeah.
it, and I watch pretty much all genres.
Me
Um,
too.
but I remember there being like this wave of horror movie or thrillers that had nothing to do with anything except for possession. It
Mhm.
was just everything was centered around some form of possession.
Yeah.
Annabelle's, The Conjuring,
Honey.
and then they started making like multiples, like sequels and trilogies, and of that same storyline, just developing it more and more and more. And I was thinking then, like, I think that they rode the wave, but if you're gonna be this stuff aside and different things in a
Mhm.
home, and it leaves some of us, they about the backlash of what happens. You
Yeah.
know, when you make a movie such as The Craft, and it's centered around high school girls and
Mhm.
insecurities and things of this nature, you don't, and maybe you do, but I don't know if they thought that, hey, somebody's going to watch this movie and going to start
They
wanting to
life
be a
gonna be ruined.
practicing witch.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
But
Yeah.
these are the things that are really, these are the casualties of the money making industry, you know, when it
Yeah.
comes to movies, that some people are more deeply affected because the things that they are displaying on TV and on the silver screen are not just a joke. It's not just a movie. Demons are real.
They
Yeah.
are. Yeah. And if you guys don't know, as far as when it comes to demons and deliverance, a good resource for that is a book called Pigs in the Parlor by Frank and Ida Mae Hammond, I believe is the name. And in the book, they talk about, demons. They kind of give you like insight into it. And they talk about how, just like, God has an army, so does the devil. And so demons basically they're organized. They have rank us in darkness or whatever. And so they were kind of going down the list, as it relates to, spiritual warfare. And when they talk about, and they went into talking about Daniel, and how when he prayed in chapter 10
Mm-hmm,
of
mm-hmm.
Daniel, and it was held up by the prince of Persia, that was a
Persia, yeah.
principality. That was a demon prince. And so they were talking about how there is rank and order, because their whole objective is to take over regions, is to take over nations and territories, is to take over families, is to take over individuals. So there's ranking, in that order, as it relates. So it's a good resource if you want to find out more and how to be aware and to guard yourself,
Mm-hmm.
personally. So, but yeah, but with that being said, I kind of wanted to go back into Jenny Weaver's video and her talking about her deliverance, and how she was a worship leader, in her church, and was leading worship and was possessed by demons. So, go ahead.
Can I go back one second? I want to
Oh
talk
yeah.
about, we were talking about the movies
Mm-hmm.
and exposure, and Miss Weaver's testimony about, and what
Yeah.
Sweet was saying, that hey, somebody will watch this and say it's a good movie, another person will say I'm finna do this, we're gonna practice this is cool,
Yeah.
especially the
Mm-hmm.
young and the to be influenced. And I
Yeah.
just wanted to say, part of my own personal life, when I was a child, I was plagued heavily by nightmares. And I'm not talking
Mm.
about, one little bad dream falling off the cliff, even though that's a bad one that I would have a lot. But I'm talking about full blown, I'm having dreams so horrible that I'm having a dream and I feel like I'm sitting up in the bed and trying to open my eyes, and then I open my eyes and then I'm in another dream, just like
Mm.
some just the demonic movie. And I remember, one time I had a dream and I was walking through this museum and it was all these evil things around me. And even like it was a
Wow.
statue of Christ, but the statue of Christ looked deformed and had blood coming out of his eyes. But then I
Mm.
saw, in this place where I was, my great grandmother was in front of me. Now, my great grandma, y'all know about my great grandma. My great grandma was a holy woman, praying woman.
Mm-hmm.
Now I know what the dream means as an adult. I had all this evilness around me, but she was guiding me through because she was praying for me in another place. But
Yeah.
I was plagued very badly, and I had told my mom I was scared to go to sleep at night.
Mm.
But being a mama who didn't know no better, and the black mama, she was like, "Go to bed before I go lay down."
Yeah.
So, but something, the Lord, or she saw something one night where she began to anoint my head with oil. All of a sudden, she began to come to my bed at night before bed, and she started. I remember she would put a cross and anoint me with oil over my head. I don't know what happened
Mm.
to make her do it, because at first she wasn't trying to hear me. And one thing I can say, movies and things were an influence of mine. I was
Mhm.
exposed to a lot. I don't know how. My parents were pretty strict, but I don't know how I was into the Nightmare on Elm Streets.
Yeah,
Because I don't
me
know if y'all
too.
remember, Nightmare on Elm Street used to have a mini
That first one
series.
was
Do you
good.
remember
Yeah, it
that?
did. Yeah, I
It
It would
remember the
I
did.
used
miniseries.
It
to watch
did.
the mini series, and I remember one night I had a
Mm.
dream that Freddy Krueger was in my dream, and he was like telling me to come down to hell. You know what I'm saying? In my dream,
What?
like it was, I was, even though
Wow.
I was plagued horribly,
Mm.
I would still be drawn to watching this
It's
stuff.
so
You know
true.
what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
But thank God for deliverance, because it was rough on me as a child. And I
Mm.
think that sometimes we don't know how the enemy will enter in,
Yeah, we
because
don't.
fear and timidity was a part of my life really heavy
Mm.
as a
Wow.
child. I don't want to get
Yeah.
too deep and take over with
No,
that, but I
that's
just wanted to
good.
say that because we talk about movies and influence, and
Um,
there is even unknowingly, it may be unknowingly to the writer of these movies and things like that, but there's an agenda
it
of a very
is.
real enemy to,
And it's
to
that, yeah.
infiltrate.
And it's that ranking. It's that ranking. And sometimes we don't know that we are being controlled by that agenda. We just think,
Mm-hmm.
oh,
Hmm.
it's arts. It's
Yeah,
just
and and
art,
and
Right,
you
and
right.
know.
and the sister said it on her testimony. She said the eye
It's
gate,
eye
it's an
gate. Yeah.
opening.
Yes, yes,
But anyway, go
yes.
ahead, Holly, to where you were going. I just
But
want to say
no,
that.
no, that's good. I think it's good for us to share our own personal experiences as,
Yeah.
that we have had. Like I experienced, a lot like when I went to Africa, it was crazy over there, my Lord. Well,
Mhm.
not crazy, but I mean, when you looking at it spiritually or whatever,
Right, right.
that there was a witch outside of our room, chanting. There was people doing
Hmm.
sacrifices, like what I'm saying.
Woo!
Like we left the church and there was a man who had created a sacrifice just for us and pointed to it so we could see it, you know and then once we got on the road,
What what
literally,
what was the sacrifice, Holly?
it was a bird. I think it was a
Okay.
turkey, and it was
Okay.
upside down. The eggs were underneath it, and it was just hanging, and he was just looking all evil, and I was like, what is really going on right now?
Wow.
And, and then once we left the church and got on the highway, it was so crazy because there was a traffic jam that day, and this was all spiritual, y'all. It was crazy. We were and what they ended up happening is we, in Africa, they don't really obey the stop signs. It's suggested, but they don't really care.
It's suggested.
But anyway, literally there was a traffic jam, and no one could get through one way, so everybody started turning around and going back down the one way street. And there was one particular, and we had to do that as well, but there was one particular car that was flying, just started gunning. It was like, oh my God. And literally right in front of us, they slammed into the what is it, the little the it's
The
concrete.
median?
Yeah, the
Uh,
little concrete median. And one of their bodies went through the windshield. Like
ooh.
I really felt like that accident was meant for us because they were driving recklessly around us, but they were the ones that ended up hitting that median. And I think that sacrifice had something to do with it. But that's just and then after but of course, when you operate in the spirit of the Lord, it ain't but so much, that they can do or whatever. But the tactic of the enemy is to bring fear. But there was a lot of nightmares that I experienced, when I came back, from that trip or whatever. And I literally had to, pray and, call things out of my house. And some people may think this is crazy, but when sometimes I would be in my room and I could literally feel someone looking at me, like, whenever you can feel a presence in the room, it was literally like I could feel somebody like right here on my face when I was asleep. So I literally was sleeping with the light on, just in fear or whatever, seeing, dark presences moving around the room and all this kind of stuff. And even when I was there, I saw a lot of stuff. I was sick and I was up, and I would see a lot of stuff in the place where we stayed. And so, eventually I had to just take authority over it, or whatever. But just, but it's real is what I'm trying to say. Just kind of piggybacking off of, April's experience, and sometimes it's just as simple as fear, as the enemy trying to instill fear in you. That becomes an open door for more things to begin to happen. So, but Sweet, did you have anything
No,
you
yeah,
wanted to
yeah. Well, I wanted to hit on that where you were talking about. We were talking about this earlier because Holly and I were watching Poltergeist,
say? Oh
and
Lord, with our crazy selves. It's
I
funny
didn't know
now.
it was
Them
three of
special
them,
effects
but
is horrible.
yeah,
Right?
that's them '80s special
I'm
effects.
telling you.
But we were watching Poltergeist, and she brought out a good point because sometimes, to the point that I was making about, and the point that April was making about, sometimes we see it, it's just
Yeah.
not overt, and we don't call it what it is. So
Yeah.
2020, clearly this baby is possessed, but we're not calling
Mhm.
it possession.
Yeah.
And Holly made a point about in Poltergeist, in one of the in part two of the movie, the spirit tried to enter in, the father wouldn't, or that
Yeah.
demonic presence tried to enter into the home, and the
Yeah.
father wouldn't grant it access. But the father was
Mhm.
so stressed out because of work, he wasn't working. They're
Mm.
being terrorized by these demons in the house.
Yeah.
He reverted to drinking, and
Mhm.
he drunk some tequila. And for you guys who don't know or may not know, sometimes tequila has a worm in it, and he drunk
Yeah.
the worm, and that was the entryway. And
Mhm.
Holly was bringing back to our remembrance, because it's been so long since I saw the movie, about how it started out with subtle things that the dad was doing that was out of
Yeah.
character, and then eventually he began to personify this thing
Mhm.
that he had consumed. And I think a lot of
Yeah.
times when we're talking about oppression and possession,
Mhm.
sometimes it's the personification of the spirit. We talk
Yes.
about the spirit of Jezebel. A lot of times people have, especially in church, sometimes they've always categorized that to be something that's attached to a woman and to a
Mhm.
woman. But the spirit of Jezebel wasn't so much about her sexuality, but
The
it was more
control,
so
yeah.
about the control and the
Mhm.
manipulation that she used.
Yeah.
Any man or woman, there are pastors right now, there are leaders
Mhm.
that are operating out of the spirit of Jezebel, out of control and manipulation. And
Yeah.
so I think it's very important that we bring that out. Sometimes it's the personification of the
Mhm.
spirit that
Yeah.
denotes that there's some oppression or uh, possession taking place. Not always the outward uh,
Mhm.
movie theatrics that go along with some,
Yeah.
and some
Not
that's it
always
too.
exorcist, but yeah,
Yeah,
that's
it's
a
not
part, yeah.
always exorcists, but then sometimes it's the other thing.
It's so
it's
true.
it's the people in the church that are so divisive and
Yes.
come with the spirit of division to
Mhm.
bring chaos and disorder and
Yeah.
confusion, because the scripture tells us that God is not an author of confusion. So
Mhm.
when you're in environments where there's so much confusion, there's no order, there's probably
Yeah.
something else at work.
Absolutely. Yeah. Go
You
ahead,
just
April.
she triggered something when y'all were talking about poltergeist and the drinking and the worm. I think that I know you're trying to get to that sister's testimony,
Oh
but
no, go ahead. This is
it
flowing.
made me think of, because she brought up drug use and stuff and her stuff too.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
again, one of the things that in America that we do deal with some strong demons, but we don't call it what it is.
Mhm.
Alcoholism and drug use. America got that on
Yeah.
lock, boy, as far as a
Come on,
demonic
my lord.
possession. Because think
K2.
about it. Think
Mhm.
about it. You
My
don't even
lord.
call. And I know this might make people upset because we love our alcohol and it's legal in
Ugh.
this country, but
Mm.
but we know about drunkenness and being drunk
Mhm.
and liquors, not wine, there's liquors and white drinks and brown drinks, and
Mhm.
what they call, you see the signs of the liquor store that says wine and spirits.
Spirits.
It
Yeah.
Do
does.
anybody ever
Come
think
on, don't
about
nobody
why
ever
they
think it.
call
Mm-mm.
why would they call the
Ah!
drink spirits?
Yep.
There is a direct spiritual connection, as the
Mm.
woman in testimony said, and as what we know, but we don't call it that, to drug use and alcohol. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never seen nobody get drunk and they were like, y'all, I got drunk as a kite and I went and I evangelized. I witnessed a few souls. I went out. I fed the homeless man. I got high and I just went out there and just started reading. I read my Bible from cover to cover, getting
Mm.
high. No, people who get high, people who are drunk, beat their wives, rape, kill, steal from you,
Mm.
pick themselves to death, do the most weird and evil
Yep.
manifestations. That is demonic. That is
Mm-hmm.
the entry, because a lot of times you have to think about how we allow this stuff to come in.
Yeah.
The liquors and strong drink ain't never made nobody be a better person.
Come
Never.
on, it's true.
Never.
It
Um,
didn't.
and again, wine and spirits. So it's just like open. We need to open our eyes. It's not. We can get into the deeper things because we're all in the church, but
Yeah.
sometimes you ain't got to know. Not, it ain't
You
that
really, yeah.
about this. That's not normal. That's not natural. And
Mm-hmm.
for someone to say there is no devil, can you please explain to me then what do you think? Because that ain't natural for me to grow up and do some of the evil that may manifest in a person who is on drugs or on alcohol. So please tell me, if there is no devil, what do you think that is coming from?
Come on.
And like I said,
What, yeah. No, I'm
no, go
sorry.
Mm-hmm.
ahead.
It's what you were saying. What are you personifying? Holly was telling me
Yeah.
about, I don't know if it was something she saw on TV. It was based off something real, or if it was, I forget. You probably can tell the story more
Okay.
about the family, the boyfriend and girlfriend that were so high on drugs that they went and murdered their family members.
Oh yeah, it was a case or whatever that happened to where well initially there was thought that they may have had schizophrenia, but they went to the house to get money, and the father wouldn't give it to him, and he murdered his mother and father. And
And it,
yeah,
yeah, that totally supports your point, April.
yeah,
No one in their right mind would
mm-hmm,
commit these type of atrocities. So when
yeah,
things like this are happening, we have to recognize there's something else influencing that.
yeah,
Yeah.
And even if the gateway is the drug, once you're under the
mm-hmm,
influence,
yeah,
driving while under the influence, what are you under the influence of?
mm-hmm.
That part.
Come on, it is so true. And then when you think about, the school shootings, that ain't in your. I don't care how bad you've been treated. Some people have been treated like come into a school and shoot up the school and shoot up. It's demonic. It's
Right.
demonic, and we don't
Churches,
see that initially. Yeah, you go Dylan Roof, you go into that's demonic.
demonic.
Yep.
So it's just believe that it exists, but sometimes it's a demonic component to that thing as well.
And there is even I remember taking early sight in college, and how even the early psychologists are talking about there being that, they viewed separate voices in their head,
Yeah,
Right.
and
that's
you're trying to
crazy.
block out what you're hearing,
Mm,
as well as trying to maintain your own thought process.
yeah, yeah.
But you can't maintain your thought process because you're so engulfed in what's going on with
Mm,
them, whoever these voices are, or the voices are talking to you. Who are those voices? We got to start
mm,
recognizing,
come on.
what those voices are, because some of the bad things about psychosis is, we ask those questions. I've asked those questions. Are the
Mm,
voices telling you to do anything? Because,
mm,
because then I have to be concerned. Are the
absolutely.
voices, if they're children or other adults there, are the voices giving you any type of directives?
Yeah.
Because last day we were talking about that, like a continuing education that I have to do, one of the like it's happening, but you can't be like,
Mm.
no, you're not hearing those voices. Those voices start telling you,
Mm-hmm.
okay, so if you're hearing things, what are they saying? Let's just talk that through.
Wow.
It's real, and we don't want to call it that, but let's
It's
call
true.
spade.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
know
and
why it got so secular, or like you were talking about the secularization. That's
yeah.
it. I was gonna make that.
I think that that there's that. I think there's a
Excuse me.
stigma, of course, on being demon possessed or having a
It
demonic
is.
component.
It
But
is.
then I think what people need to realize is that is not an indictment on you. This
Mm-hmm.
is
That's good.
spiritual. This is
Right.
spiritual, and these spirits don't play fair. They don't care
Oof.
about. So it's like it's not an indictment on you as a person, and I think that
Mm-hmm.
is what has put the line in the sand as far as not wanting to call it
What it
that component what it is.
That is so good,
Yeah.
Holly. That is such a good point, because it just reminds me of the conversation that we had last week with Shamika, and it's
Mhm.
still tying into the mental health,
It is.
because that same indictment about being able to say I'm demon possessed or I was possessed with demons is the
Yeah.
same indictment for people who have mental health diagnoses.
It's so
There is a
true.
stigma. The whole purpose of mental health awareness was to discount the stigma attached to mental
Mm.
health.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
when we can detach these stigmas,
Mm.
then maybe people will be more open about what their struggles are. If they are
Yes.
hearing voices, or if they
Hmm.
are experiencing anxiety, if they are experiencing low lows, because the joy of the Lord is strength. And
Yeah.
so when
Yes.
you're in the quote unquote, Jordan Peele sunken place, you can't
Hmm.
function
It's so
when you're so
true.
low. And it,
Yeah.
and it, it prevents you from moving forward. It prevents you from your purpose. It prevents you from your calling if you can't get
Yes.
out the low place, the
It's
dark
so
place.
true.
And
Mm.
so I think that, you know, uh, in churches and things, like, we do have to have these conversations where it's not a negative affront to the individual if they
Yeah.
have experienced something that has entered in without,
Yeah.
unaware. Because
Mm.
the point still to be made for Miss Weaver is she was born again,
Come on.
saved, following
Did
the
all the
Lord,
right things.
leading
Yeah.
worship. And that's what she said.
Hmm.
I don't have any spirits. I'm the worship
Yeah.
leader. But okay, pray
Hmm.
for me. And
Yeah.
there were these things that had not come out. And so, when we don't treat it as a regular scheduled maintenance for the
Come
believer,
on.
On.
then
That's
we
good.
leave room for pride to come in,
Yes.
and all those things.
Because we all need deliverance. The word says deliverance is the children's bread.
Come
Come on,
on.
somebody.
That's
Is
what
That's
it
your
what it
says.
say.
right? Is she
Right.
right? So it's something that is, for lack of a better word, natural in a sense, because we all do need deliverance. We all have gone through things. We all have a past, and
Mm-hmm.
we all need to be delivered in some form or another from that past, whether it's overt, like what Miss Weaver experienced, or whether it's like more of a process to where we working it out, as we walk out our salvation.
And
Deliverance
stuff
is
is falling off.
necessary for
Yeah.
all.
And I would even say, Holly, we got a past, and some of us have a very real present.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some,
Okay. Well, this is
Still going
true.
some
through trauma.
You got that
some of the
right.
stuff that's going on right now this year in 2020,
Oh,
some of this year has brought up past triggers for people. And then some people
yeah.
have started to experience new things. Some people who
Hmm.
weren't dealing with anxiety and depression are now beginning to deal with
Yeah.
anxiety and
Yeah.
depression. And it wasn't something that was in the past. It's the
Mm,
circumstances and those
yeah.
outside influences. Like April was talking about, how the enemy attacked her in her time of rest with nightmares,
Yes.
but then she spent a majority, or a portion of her life, dealing with fear and timidity.
Yeah. 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 Yeah,
you
and
know.
that's the thing, and what could be at the root of that, like you said, with that fear and I mean the depression, and anxiety is that fear, is the fear that is rampant in the atmosphere that we talked about on the last episode of the mental health. Because of that fear, it has produced anxiety and depression,
Right,
so it's
right,
that spiritual component as well
right.
as having to work out those practical steps. So,
Mm-hmm.
oof, my Lord.
Yeah.
Mm. But speaking of Jenny Weaver, she talked about, how she had been given a platform, and she was leading worship and had no idea, she was still, had those spirits within her. What do you guys think about that when it comes to what should be the process that churches take whenever they have, well, first of all, do you feel like churches are aware enough to recognize when they have somebody in position? Well, I guess you can't really speak to that. Let me see. I'm trying to figure out how to ask the question. Do you feel overall that there is an awareness, like when it comes to putting people in position and, making sure they've worked out certain things before getting up to lead others? Or do you feel as though people should
Sorry.
have?
Oh, look at this sweet
Oh, okay, go ahead. Maybe you
No,
know what I'm saying.
I want April to answer first.
Go ahead, because y'all know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
I
we
don't
know
know how
what
to
you're
get it
trying to
yeah,
out.
we
say.
do.
Well, go ahead.
My comment
Oh,
is so sarcastic in nature. I'm
oh,
gonna
oh,
let the pastor speak because
okay.
I.
No, you need to go because I think we thinking the same thing.
No, go ahead. You go. You
Well,
go.
I'm gonna say this, and this is no slight to anybody. I'm a part of the church. I love the church, and I am not perfect at all. But I feel like no, half of us don't notice anything. We so happy to have somebody in a
Nothing.
position to do something in the
Nothing.
church. We just set you up there. We already can openly see the stuff you ain't delivered from, but we like the Lord will work it out as you work.
Go on up
And
there,
we were
baby.
gonna put you up
Oh,
there. We prop you up. We build you up. You can still
Yep.
fornicate. You can still be
ooh,
doing all
especially the
kinds of
musicians,
stuff.
honey. They don't give a
You
fuck.
can't even look.
Some
Let me
of them
tell
don't
you.
give a
Leave the
shit what they
Some of
musicians
doing.
these.
alone.
Yeah, look,
Some
listen.
of them don't. Some of them do
Yeah,
though.
listen. I can tell some of the lack of deliverance from lust by the way that the worship leader is even dressed.
Ooh.
You can't even wear the right garments. I know you got
Yes,
something going
Lord.
on, and you in front of all the people. I'm
Oh,
sorry. I really think that we so busy trying to have people up in positions because we need this and we have this, that I think that sometimes pastors
Ooh.
and leaders who set people in positions look a blind eye to all the lack of deliverance needed. And
Mm.
that's an old school Pentecostal holiness move. And I mean old school because now the holiness and Pentecostals don't even pay attention to it.
Oh,
But
wow.
old school Pentecostal holiness move that if you are not delivered, you can't do
do
nothing in the
nothing
church but go to the altar.
Ooh.
You
and sit on the front
go
row.
to the altar until you right, then you can serve.
Ooh.
Anyway,
Well, go
okay.
ahead, sweetie, and I gotta piggyback off of that.
Well, April should end her statement where I digress.
Ooh.
I agree. I was sitting here thinking, them jokers don't know because church is now, and I'm with April. I love the church.
Mhm.
I'm in the church. I'm a part of the church. I defend the church. I stand for the church. So this isn't a bash the church moment, but it is a
Mhm.
calling spades moment. And I think a majority of church as we know it in this time and age and disposition, whatever you want to call it, church is business.
Mm.
So sometimes I think it's less about whether or not you got spirits and you need to be delivered, but more so about the qualities and the talents and the gifts that you have.
Mhm.
Can you meet this need? It's a
Yeah.
budget that we got. So yes, Mr. Musician, or yes, Mr. Youth Pastor, or yes, Mr. Whoever, or yes, Miss Whoever. Because it's not even
Mhm.
about whether or not the inside is right. It's
Mm.
about what you said already, or what April said about the appearance of
Yeah.
holiness and godliness. And so we don't do any deep dives. Applying for a church or having a position in a church
No deep
is like
dives.
going to a job and presenting your good
Jesus.
resume. And
Ooh.
I've served at this church for such and such time, and I went to this ministry school, and I
Mm.
have this accolade. And oh yeah, by the way, I'm completely possessed with the spirit of lust and whatever else, but that part you don't know. Willing to be vulnerable, and just to give grace to the pastors. I don't even know what the solution is for
Mm.
necessarily for how to move through that. I'm
That's
a
what I
big
was gonna ask next.
proponent.
Yeah.
I'm a big proponent for community.
Yeah.
And so I think when you're in community with people and when you're close with people, the friction of even just being close, stuff will start to come out. Because if
Yeah.
I'm dealing with something, or if there's something going on deeper within me, at some point in time, it's going to show itself. It's going to
True.
manifest. You can only cover up who you really are for so
For so
long
long.
before the facade has to come down.
Yeah.
But I think what happens is by the time we get to the facade coming down, you've already been serving for a year. You've already
So
been serving for
true.
2 years. So it's
Mm.
the subtleties of what we see through that 2-year tenure that we realize, I think sister so-and-so or brother so-and-so may be dealing with X.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
And
and, I,
uh-huh.
and I don't think we always create a culture where it's okay to say, I'm dealing with
Yeah.
X.
That's so true.
And I'm gonna tell you something. By the time they serve that year or two, their demons have exercised their liberties with others,
Yep.
and traumatized others.
Exercise in
um,
liberty.
I don't know what other way to put it. I mean,
Ooh.
really,
Yeah,
and I
it's
think,
true.
like Sweet said, I don't think there's any easy answer. I'm not trying to be puffed up either or extra harsh
Mhm.
on the leaders, but I think the she is right. It's like running this nowadays, like running a business, and this over eagerness to just get people in positions where if you
Mm.
sit with a person and say, okay, this is something you want, you have this gift and talent, let me sit with you for a moment.
Yeah.
We won't prop you up in the highest pinnacle yet, because I
Mm.
don't even know you yet.
Yeah.
And the thing is, when you see it, say something. You know what I'm saying? Because
Mhm.
what happens
See
is
something,
people
say something.
say, yeah, see something, say something. Because when you do see it, people see it and they say, well, dang, but I can't lose so and so. Because if I say
Yeah.
something about this, then
Mm.
they may not want to serve. And then what am I going to do? It is a whole wrong
Wow.
motive. Instead of saying, I see this, and you will destroy yourself, your family, and the other members of this church. And I can't allow that. So,
Mhm.
we're going to do something else.
Yeah. Well, how do you respond to those who may feel like deliverance is forever? Like, and what I mean by that is that deliverance being a daily walk. And so just because a person has not completely come out of whatever they're in, but they're actively working towards that, does that mean they shouldn't serve?
Look. She don't fell out. Let me exercise grace, because it's what you already said. We're
Mhm.
not trying to be pumped up. We're not.
Yeah.
And we're not coming across, and I'm speaking for all of us, we're not coming across as though there is no sin in our lives, that there are
Hmm.
no things that we aren't daily walking out our own soul salvation in. But there
Hmm.
does come a point in time when we're talking about deliverance and being delivered, where there should be a turning. It's not a
Hmm.
360 turn. It's a 180 turn. You were going
Hmm.
this way, you made a U-turn, you're going a whole other direction. At some point in time, you have to be delivered if you're going to say that you're delivered. There
Yeah.
has to be a representation of a turning.
Hmm.
And if there's no turning, then we need to sit down and work through what that looks like.
Hmm.
Or see if that's even what you really want to do. Because some
Got
people
you.
want to keep their demons.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, and you hear a lot of talk in the church. We kind of label it. It was my struggle. That's, that's the catchphrase as far as struggle. But I do feel like that there are those individuals who may be dealing with some stuff that may take them some time to come out of. So I was
Yeah.
trying to figure out how to navigate, how would you even navigate that type of a situation to where
I
God is using them, because he uses all, and regardless, he used David. He was a murderer. How about, I mean, I'm just bringing out the other
no
parts of
no
what
no. I
people.
think that's good. I
He
think
used Moses. Moses killed somebody. Used them. Used
I
Abraham. He was
think
a liar. What do
he was a big
you say to
liar.
that?
I I think what I would say to that is to add to my whole speech I just gave about deliverance and there being attorney, because my
Mm-hmm.
pastor says something that he was like, if you're still in the struggle, it means you have not been overtaken, because you're
Mm,
still fighting. I
yeah.
think when you're talking about struggles, I think this is where discipleship becomes a very, very big component,
Mm-hmm.
because who's helping you walk through those struggles and who's
Mm,
discipling you through that struggle. And then I think as the leader or whoever's doing the discipling or whatever that looks like, how is this struggle, if not taken care, I don't, for lack of a better word, if this struggle isn't handled properly,
mm-hmm.
how will it impact those that you may be leading?
Mm.
Because
Well,
if
that's
if
true.
you're gifted to do, I'm just throwing this out, and this is like far extreme. So I'm not saying this is happening, but this is like worst case scenario.
Mm-hmm.
You are gifted to be a youth minister, male or
Mm-hmm.
female. That is the anointing on your life. You don't went through the classes. It's your purpose. It's your calling, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
But you also like kids. That's a
Mm.
struggle. And we're not judging you because that's your struggle. But we may
Yeah.
not be able to allow you to work in that ministry.
Yeah,
Mm.
we not.
Definitely not.
Right. That's my point.
Yeah.
Because what you're struggling with has potential, if not reined in and dealt
Mm.
with,
To lead
to
people astray.
to
Yeah.
lead people astray, to cause hurt and harm to
Mm-hmm.
others. So I think when we're talking about the utilization of gifts and talents as we all navigate through our struggle places, I think that's something that definitely needs to be considered. If you're utilizing ministry, especially in positions of leadership, how does that convey if your struggle is not dealt with? How does that convey when you got a lust demon and you hitting on the worship
Mm.
leaders, but you're
My
married?
Lord.
Yeah.
So she doesn't feel comfortable being a part
Mm.
of the worship team because you said something inappropriate. You
Oh
touched
my.
her inappropriate. You're anointed. You're awesome at what you
Mm-mm.
do. You are gifted by the most high God, but this is a struggle. So do we
Yeah.
say, no, you can't be the musician? How do we handle that? Because now your struggle is starting to seep over and seep out.
Mm.
And this is my thing. I think that sometimes that we upbuild the level or define being used by God in the performance level ministry
Oh, that's
platforms.
good. That's real
Mm.
good, ain't
Very
it?
good.
Oh, can God cannot still use it? And you know, he can use you all day long. He can use you to be a good parent. He can use you to be a good worker.
But you ain't coming up in here.
He can use you to you do a good job at your job. You know what I'm saying? And minister
Greet
to your
these people in Jesus'
coworkers.
name.
But you do not have to be up somewhere where you will
Yeah.
damage and traumatize another generation or other people. That
Mm-hmm.
God is not, I really don't think God is as concerned as we are about the,
Mm.
well, can it be, he can't be used to sing. You can sing in the shower all day long. God cares your soul. He says, I wish
Yeah.
above all things that you should prosper and be in
Prosper
health,
your soul,
even as your
Mhm.
your
soul
soul.
prosper. So if
Yeah.
your soul is diminished and you are demonically possessed, you don't want deliverance or don't know how to get deliverance,
Mhm.
it is not for us to prop you up in a place where the enemy can just drop you down. And when we bring up
Mm.
things like David, which is a good point,
Yeah.
but see, David for many years was being by a demon possessed boss he had named by the name of Saul, had all
Mhm.
kinds of opportunities to murder this man and would have been rightfully
Mm.
so because the man was attempting to murder him.
Murder him.
He
Yeah.
served that man. He had him in his grasp and did not dishonor him. And many times
Mhm.
God allowed people to come across David's path to not allow him to sin in that way. If y'all remember the story of David and Abigail. And I'm sorry
Mhm.
for y'all, those of y'all that don't have Bible knowledge, read your Bible. But
Read.
the point I'm making is that yes, we do know he murdered was it Bathsheba's wife? I mean
Oh
her
no, his
Bathsheba's
well,
husband.
he
husband
allowed him
Bathsheba.
to go in first in the army.
He
Right,
murdered
right,
him.
right, right,
Well,
right.
yeah.
So, he made sure he got killed. Okay.
Right.
He made sure he got killed and
Mm.
committed adultery. But after the prophet came and the light came on in that man's
He
head,
was
like,
quick to repent.
it was me.
Ooh.
I'm a murderer. And I
Yeah.
got all these wives or whatever I have, and God allowed me to have it. And I still
Mm.
went and killed somebody. He repented, and you
He
ain't never
did.
hear about another incident like that again. And
Mhm.
people don't realize is the consequences and repercussions.
Yeah.
After he did that, his family line was in shambles.
It's so
His
true.
children and his
That
children's
seed,
children was
yeah.
the
Crazy.
devil went and just rush out through his
Mm.
family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it ain't like it was without consequence. People always bring
Mm.
up David. Well,
And
David
the
did
baby
this,
died.
and the
It's so
baby died,
true.
and the baby died. There was consequence. It's not just
Was
like he was just able to get up there and do his thing and sin, and hey, God still
mm.
And the Lord didn't allow him to build the temple.
God didn't allow him to
Mm.
build the temple. And when
Wow.
Solomon had all the wives, people love to bring up Solomon. Solomon had a lust problem that I don't know what pit of hell that came from. I don't know how he dealt with all the
He
women.
got it from his daddy.
Got it from his daddy
Yeah.
times triple, quadruple. But
Oof.
you know what? When God said, I told you, don't do this. Don't marry all these foreign women. They're going to turn your heart away from me. And do you know what the Bible, nobody ever quotes, but the Bible said that he died and his heart was away from God.
Mm.
Mm.
People don't think about that part. There was
Wow.
consequence to not making the 180.
Oh
So
wow.
one thing I pray from this episode in dealing
Mm.
with mental health month, this is the one where since we're not doctors, we're not,
Mm-hmm.
psychologists,
Right.
we can say don't secularize your mental health.
Yeah.
Do the work with the mental health professionals,
Mm-hmm.
but please add the spiritual component of the
Yeah.
Lord who does deliver.
Mm.
Add
Yes.
that.
Come on.
Add prayer. Add the word
Yes.
of God. Add those things. They can only
Mm.
help, and add deliverance. It can be
Yes.
a scary thing even up to other Christians. Cause
Yeah.
I done been at some deliverance ministries. Shout out to my
My
girlfriend
God.
Tish if she watching.
I'm
and,
glad you said that. I was going to say something about that, but go
uh-huh.
ahead.
And that's
Oh,
a sight to behold. Everybody ain't trained up that way.
yes.
Some of that
Yeah,
I was like,
no.
oh my, she read me prayer rain. I think it was. I was scared to repeat some of that stuff.
Whew.
I was
What
like
when
that.
you
What now?
renounce and stuff?
She's talking about tell it to die by
Rena-
fire. Tell it to
oh,
die.
whew.
It's like, it's like the prayer rain is a very aggressive,
My God.
uh African prayers of deliverance, honey. And they
Honey,
just
them
be
Africans
bossing the
knew.
demons around anyway.
Oh my God.
But
But
yeah.
yeah, but that point of when you were talking about the whole when he committed the sin and how it affected his seed, I was thinking about pigs in the parlor. That was one of the ways they were talking about demons enter is through, that whole family thing. And he was talking about how his mother had struggled so much with nervousness, and he ended up struggling with nervousness later on in his adult life and had to get delivered from that. And then he had several family members that had heart attacks, and so that fear of having a heart attack came on him to the point that he had one and had to go through deliverance as it relates.
If you should choose to listen to her testimony, there was some some sacrificial worship and things, you know, through her great grandparents and
Yeah.
things of that nature that just, you know, trickle down. And I think I was wanting to make a comment off of what April said about deliverance and, you know, her
Mm-hmm.
experience, because I think there's also this misnomer that it's been portrayed as something that maybe it's not. And even though it may be in some sects, it may be portrayed as one way and,
Mm-hmm.
you know, very demonstrative and things of that nature. But I think it's still something that's very vital, and it's
Yeah.
something that should be entertained,
Mm-hmm.
even as simple as the denouncing, because it's like what I was saying before. Every deliverance isn't categorized by manifestations of spirits,
Right.
True. Mm-hmm.
you know. So I don't want listeners to have this mental image of people slithering around like
Exorcists all
snakes
the
and
time.
growling,
Yeah.
you
Right.
know,
Right.
and what we've
Yeah.
seen in media, to be like, I hope I don't want to be, I hope I don't have none of that in me. You know, it
Mm-hmm.
could just be for some the denouncing of things that have come
Absolutely.
in,
Yeah.
and calling those things out and saying you have no place here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, and speaking of deliverance ministries, do you think that every church should have one?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. You should
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
deliverance ministry like you got hospitality and greeters at the door.
Yeah. Everybody needs to have a portion of their church that knows how to deal with the heavy stuff, I say.
Yeah.
Exactly. It,
Hmm.
even if it's not, you know, a whole full-fledged quote unquote team, because I think because we're all a part of the body, the church is a
Mhm.
part of the body. There are different parts of the body that are skilled, and that's their area.
Right.
Yeah.
Some ministries, their deliverance ministry is in their title. Some
Hmm.
ministries, they're prophetic. Some ministries, they're going to teach you on the practicality of the word. Some ministries are heavy in praise and worship. They're all arms and legs and feet and toes and fingers and things of that nature. But I do feel like what April said is true. There needs to be someone in the ministry that is equipped to handle things if they get a little bit intense.
Hmm.
Absolutely. I definitely agree with that. You know, that needs to be a part, because I do believe that deliverance is both. You do have those like you see, talking about, you know, the spirits being more overt, and then it's also a daily walk. It looks like discipleship. It looks like,
Right.
you know, walking through those principles, you know, of the word, somebody actually helping you walk through it, and you working out your own soul
Oh,
salvation as
salvation.
well. So I think it has all of those components, you know. So definitely it's needed in every church. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
well, I think we have, my God, talked about everything around demons and deliverance. But
Yeah.
definitely this episode was to just to show that you know, God is still the greatest power. He
Oh,
still
yes.
is
Yes.
the
Oh, yes.
greatest power. And for us not to forget that, you know, regardless of what we see in the media, regardless of what we see in this world, he's still in control and has the
Mm-hmm.
final say. So
Yes, he
just to,
does.
so
Who
definitely
has the
was not an
final
episode to give glory
say?
to the devil, but to expose him
Yeah.
and to reveal the power of God. So I hope that we did that. And so we're just gonna go into our final words and wrap it up. If you guys had any final words, because we've said a lot. So
Yeah.
I don't even know what to say.
April.
Well, I just say that again. I'll just reiterate one small thing that I did say, which is to involve, don't secularize your mental health, you know, totally. You know, add the Lord. There is a spiritual component to these things. And even for people that have family members with mental health, don't think that just because you know, you're trying to be balanced. Yes, be balanced. Send them to the doctor, you know, help them take their medications, but you go pray for their peace and for God to be the ruler. And if they're hearing voices, that they also hear the voice of that they will obey. Whatever. But you know, just know that the devil is a real thing. You know, if he wasn't, the Bible wouldn't mention them.
Yeah.
In our belief, the Bible is the word of God, and so if God says he exists, he exists.
Yeah.
But God is a greater power, so that's it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, April actually took my words, but I was just going to say that, to piggyback off of what I started off with, my first comments were, which is angels are real, God is real, Lucifer is real, and demons are real.
Yeah.
And I think that as believers that we all are, we do our listeners a disservice by not acknowledging, not by any means to bring glory, but like
Hmm.
all things that we're doing to reveal truth.
Yes,
And the
absolutely.
truth is, there is an adversary.
Hmm.
There is someone who has been assigned to prevent, to overthrow, to deter the plans and the purpose that God has placed on not only our lives, but your lives.
Yeah,
You do have a real enemy. But the hope that we all have is that our God is greater. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
we know that he has the final say. Be aware, um, be sober and be vigilant, because that's what the scripture says. He is roaring. He's seeking who he can devour. So we just
Hmm.
want to bring attention that it's real. He's
Yeah,
real, but greater is he that's within us. So
absolutely.
Yes.
be encouraged by that you have the power of the Holy Spirit, who we partner with daily, working on the inside of us.
Yes, absolutely. And I just piggyback off everything that they said. And just to reiterate that, the enemy is real, but so is God, and he is the greater power, and that deliverance is available to all, is necessary
Yes,
for all. We all need it. Let's take the
yes,
Yes.
stigma off of it, whether it's
yes,
overt or whether it's subtle. We need
yes.
deliverance, and we need to also, in the same token, do our part comes to making good choices. With the you may reap those on track, with God and following his purpose and his plan and his word, is the best thing that we can do for ourselves in order to live a life free from the influence of the enemy.
Mm-hmm,
So I
mm-hmm.
would encourage you to, and going back to the mental health piece, take the stigma off of that as well. Do your work
Absolutely.
and do your
Do
work.
your work.
Do
Do
Yeah.
your
your work.
spiritual work and do your
And do
natural
your
work.
natural one.
And
Amen.
Amen.
I'm going
Yeah.
to end it on
Amen.
that. All
Yeah.
right. Well, this has been another episode of the Truth Revealed podcast. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Do not forget to like, to subscribe, to share, share, share. And until next time, bye.
Bye. Peace.
Okay, so as you saw what we was talking about, right? Okay. Well, anyway, we're gonna go one by one and kind of go through, the things that, were missing from the parts that we talked about. So I believe it was around minute 9, I began to talk about, giving the devil too much credit, because we were talking about the reason why people no longer believe that the devil exists. And what I was trying to convey was the fact that, because there have been an overemphasis, there have even been, murderers who have claimed, the devil made me do it, or I heard voices and stuff like that. So because so much of that has happened over time, and it's been an over emphasis on the devil, a lot of people have started to think, okay, that's far fetched, and they have just completely stumped out his existence, because it's like, you control what you do, which you do. You do have a choice in the matter of what you do, but there is an influence behind the scenes. So that's what I
Mm-hmm.
was trying to convey there. And then going on to, I believe it was around minute 27, where I was talking about the pigs in a parlor, and I kind of started out talking about Ephesians chapter 6, where it talks about, you know, that there be, spiritual wickedness in high places, rulers of darkness, that there are, y'all help me out. What's the rest of it in Ephesians?
Oh, spiritual.
For we
Yeah,
wrestle not
yes,
against flesh
Wrestle
and
not
blood.
yeah,
against.
there we go. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but principalities, the rulers of darkness,
Darkness
spiritual wickedness in
and
high
in high
places.
places. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I was kind of going down, and that's what the Pigs in the Parlor does, is it kind of shows the ranking order. And then I went into talking about Daniel chapter 10, where he was praying, and the prince of Persia, that was a
Mhm.
demon prince, and just showing
Mhm.
that demons are organized, they have rank, and
Yes.
they've been given directives on what to do in particular areas and cities and nations. You ever wonder why you go to a certain city and it's known for a certain thing? Chicago,
Mhm.
all of the shootings that are going
Murder.
on there, principality.
Come on.
Yeah.
It's New Orleans, you got a lot of witchcraft that goes on over
Mhm.
there, principality. So those are the things that I was trying to convey by showing the different
Mhm.
rankings in that particular minute. And let's see, then in minute 43 I began talking about, I believe April initially talked about the sentiment as it relates to how we label our demonic stuff is something else, as mental health. And then so I kind of went into talking about how school shootings, that's not normal, that's demonic. And then I went into talking about dealing Ruth, and how he went in and literally sat in the church, had service with them, knew
Yeah.
he was going to kill them, and then took their lives. That is demonic. And then the police came and took him to Burger King. Okay. But that's another.
She digresses.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
Lord.
And that was demonic.
Come on. Okay. Let me see. Where else did I think that might have been all that I had, I believe. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So part of what was cut off for me, there are a couple of things that you guys probably heard were missing. One of the things that I think I was speaking about was just going into areas. I think I initially was talking about movies and how the movie industry has made a lot of money off demons and diabolical things and ghost stories and haunted houses and things of that nature. And the point that I think I was trying to make was pertaining to the testimony of Miss Weaver, who talks about watching a movie such as The Craft and having already experienced some insecurities and things within herself, and gravitating to this movie, which in turn led to gravitating towards witchcraft. And how a lot of times when these things are being done from a entertainment standpoint, it looks as though it's big business, but in actuality there is a ramification that's taking place spiritually that they may have no knowledge of or no clue of, because they don't have a full understanding of what they're actually introducing on a mass level. I think one of the other things that I was speaking about is how we can go into places, we can go into homes, we can experience things, and how spirits can be attached to inanimate things, and ghost stories and haunted houses and things of that nature. Those things are cute, but in nature, what we're dealing with is a spirit, um, a familiar spirit, something that has really, at the end of the day, desires to torment you. And so, just being cognizant of those things, that it's not something superficial. It's not just Casper the Friendly Ghost. There is an assignment. If that assignment is nothing but to disrupt your peace and sleep, that's an assignment. I think one of the other things that I was mentioning, and I'm just referring to my notes, that possibly was omitted, was in dealing with demon possession and demon oppression as it pertains to the church. We as the church and we as believers have to really position ourselves to be vulnerable, to say, this is something that I'm dealing with.
Yeah.
Because I think what's happened within the body, outside of the fact that these things aren't really taught heavily and aren't really expounded upon. So there's one, a lack of full knowledge of what it means to be possessed or oppressed. Two, there's a stigma attached to it, just like mental health. So you have people who are dealing with anxiety, they're dealing with depression, they're dealing with bipolar, they're dealing with schizophrenia. And this kind of ties into our mental health segment because we kind of dropped this episode in the middle, but they're dealing with these things. And part of the first step of getting help with anything, whether it's mental health, physical health, or spiritual health, is being able to say, here's what I'm dealing with. But in order before you can even say, here's what I'm dealing with, there has to be a level of vulnerability that says, I'm going to be vulnerable with X and say, I'm dealing with this. And so I think what's happened within the body is that we haven't necessarily cultivated that community and that safety of being vulnerable, because when we think about possession and oppression, we sometimes have those silver screen examples, and then we even look at our biblical examples where the man talks about the man being possessed with legion and the things that he was doing to harm himself. And so you have this negative framework, and I think there's a shame attached to saying, I'm dealing with this, and it may be a Jezebel spirit, and and that may look like control and manipulation, but nobody wants to call it what it is. And so I think we have to be vulnerable when we recognize things, when people are super divisive, when there's confusion running amok in your family, in your church ministry, in your life, on your job. Sometimes you have to look at it and say, is there a spiritual component that I'm completely missing? And is this person really at the end of it all, the root of it all, there's something governing them? It's another spirit that's manifesting. So I think that's something that we definitely have to pay attention to, because even from the standpoint of mental health and spiritual possession and things of that nature, in those early days, I think they were married. Somewhere along the lines, they became separated. And I think, I may be repeating myself a little bit, but I know one of the things that we were bringing out is, or that we want to bring out is, just because a person may be experiencing mental health doesn't necessarily mean that there's something spiritual, but it also doesn't mean that it's not. Because when you look at things like the Dylan Roos and the atrocities that have taken place, even from the people who have pled insanity, we have to, at the base level, say anyone in their right mind would not do X, Y, or Z. So even from a mental health standpoint, we still have to acknowledge that there could have been literally something else at work. And what we endeavor to do on this episode is to identify what the something else is. And it's the enemy, it's our adversary, who's seeking to destroy, who's like a roaring lion, seeking to devour, seeking to steal, kill, and destroy by any means necessary. And so if it has to come through mental health, then that's the avenue that it will utilize. So we just wanted to kind of reiterate things that may have been omitted in the cowardly attempt.
Well,
that's right. Cowardly attempt.
Right.
Like I said, the devil always overplays his hand because he can't out strategize God. But anyhow, I think my only place was during our closing, our final thoughts. The point that I was making was pertaining to the mental health aspect and the secularization of it, and just not being afraid to do both, particularly for family members of those who have mental health issues that are maybe really extreme, to, yes, get them the help they need. Yes, help them with their medication if they are on meds. Make sure they get their appointments. Help them do the work. But don't forget to pray. Don't
Yeah.
forget to pray over your family member and
Yeah.
ask the Lord in to help with the situation, because it is a twofold problem. It's a twofold problem.
Yeah.
Like Sweet had said, it's not necessarily always either or, it can be both.
Yeah.
There is a spiritual component behind all of this, really, honestly,
All of it.
all of
Yeah.
it.
Definitely.
So definitely pray for your family members if they are dealing with schizophrenia and hearing voices. Pray that they also hear the voice of God and know the
Yeah.
difference and listen to
Yeah.
that voice. Just
Mm-hmm.
don't forget to add the spiritual component. Don't just chuck it up to, well, they just crazy. No, there is an enemy who has characteristics,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
as Sweet already said, to steal, kill, and destroy. And that means steal the mind,
Mm-hmm.
steal your peace, destroy your ability
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
function.
Yeah.
So just pray. Like, some of y'all know about laying on of hands, and I told the story about my mother when I had the nightmares really bad, and she anointed my head with oil before bed. Just be led and do the spiritual work as well as the physical work. I think that was my sentiment on that part. And that was all
Yeah.
I had.
Okay.
And I would just like to add too, if someone's listening and we really didn't scratch the surface of
Yeah.
this topic, but if someone's listening and you have questions, and I don't think we've ever done this, but I do feel encouraged to say we do have a Facebook page, which is the Truth Reveal podcast, just like the title, Truth Reveal
Mm-hmm.
Podcast. The logo is the same, so that can be an identifier where if you have even more questions, we would definitely be open to, just
Absolutely.
instant message us or, DM
Yes.
us, and we check that message box, and, we'll definitely try to answer your questions to the best of our abilities. Pray for you, pray with you, and provide you with
Mm.
resources to give you a better understanding and knowledge. And then, as Holly already has stated, in the show notes, there is going to be that pigs in a parlor book that she'll, tag for you to also use as a reference. And I'm sure if you
Yeah.
tag that, then all other stuff will start coming up too.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll also have Jenny Weaver's testimony underneath
Yeah.
for you guys to click on to, because she kind of goes into a deep, in-depth teaching as well
Right,
as she
right.
goes on testimony. There's actually 2 parts to it, so we'll put it in our show notes as well. But yeah, hopefully we have covered everything that was missing. If not, fill in the blanks. You know what we was trying to say.
That's right.
You get the picture.
Yeah, you get the picture.
Yeah.
A real enemy out here in these streets.
For real though.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for hanging out with us and for bearing with that video. I mean, it had its place, its moments, but overall, I'm pretty sure you were able to hear the most of the conversation. So we tried to fill in the blanks here. So hope you guys have an amazing evening. Thank you for hanging out with us, and bye.
Bye.